He even checks behind him to make sure that she's talking to him. He wonders what exactly Kathleen told her for things to come to this. At this point, it's hardly a surprise that Art is on a first-name basis with the Princess of Sapin. He might end up causing a civil war if he steals the heart of not one but two princesses from different kingdoms, yet he quickly brushes that thought aside to talk about more serious matters. He is a first-year student who hasn't even finished his first day of school. He questions whether it would even be possible for someone like him to become a professor. Cynthia calms him down and tells him that it's quite simple. As long as the director allows it, it's possible. In fact, there have been cases where highly qualified upperclassmen started teaching basic courses. So contrary to what he might think, this is not that special. But if Art would start teaching the class, what would happen to Professor Geist? Cynthia quickly answers this question by telling him that he has been dismissed from the academy. This does come as a surprise to Art. She also tells him that shortly after she heard what happened in the class, she had an investigation launched against him. With Kathleen's help, he had no room to defend himself. She even mentions that she has never seen Kathleen so angry before. But something like that would be hard for Art to notice. After all, he is not the emotional type. In any case, Art starts wondering why Cynthia is doing this. What ulterior motives does she have this time? She assures him that it's just a simple coincidence. A spot opened up and she just wants him to fill it. She doesn't have any hidden intentions this time. This would be a good opportunity for him to build his reputation, and Cynthia wouldn't have to worry about Art going around conquering her professors. Although this will put him into the spotlight to some extent, she reassures him that it would be well placed to defend him if necessary. Parents are bound to complain, but it is still better than canceling the clause altogether. Cynthia leaves the choice up to Art. She still urges him to accept the offer, as it would be a better use of his time than sitting through a class, which he's clearly overqualified for. Since his plan to keep a low profile has already been ruined, he decides to accept the offer. With that, Art leaves for his classes. Cynthia discusses their meeting with her bond. There is something about Art that always keeps her on her toes. Even negotiating with the royal families isn't as nerve-wracking for her as it is when she's dealing with Art. She asks her bond, Avier, for his opinion on the matter. He tells Cynthia that Art is different. Whether it's his mental acuity or emotional maturity, there is much more to him than the eye meets. He says this because of Sylvie. After just one meeting with her, Avier has realized that Sylvie is actually a dragon. This revelation leaves Cynthia speechless. Avier even states that in time his strength will become incomparable to Sylvie's. He warns her not to make an enemy out of Art. If treated right, he could become her greatest ally. But on the other hand, if he's betrayed, then he may be the cause of Decathan's demise. Art makes his way to the cafeteria. There he meets up with Elijah, who's busy talking to a girl. This is quite unusual. Normally, girls tend to avoid him. Nevertheless, Art takes a seat beside him. Elijah introduces her as Charlotte. While talking about their classes, Elijah mentions that he especially liked the chain casting and mana utilization classes. And that's also where he met Charlotte. She is his classmate from the chain casting class. Elijah inquires about how Art's classes are going. He had already heard that Art beat up a professor, but he doesn't know anything more than that. When Art reveals that he's going to be teaching that same class, Elijah spits out his food from shock. While wiping his face, he once again states that he ended up replacing the teacher who taught that class, so he shouldn't be going around spitting his food on a professor. Elijah becomes intrigued and even mentions that he might end up ditching his class to see him in action. On the topic of ditching classes, he tells that he and Charlotte are going shopping. He invites Art to join them. For some reason, this gets her really excited. Art politely declines the offer, telling him that he has 3 more classes to attend. Hearing this, the girl also makes up the excuse that she has a plan for today, and maybe they can go shopping some other time. Now it finally starts to make sense why a girl would be hanging out with Elijah. She probably just wanted to become friends with Art, so she was using Elijah to get to him. However, his dim-witted friend doesn't realize it. He goes on and on about how she's so nice and pretty, and even asks Art if he has a shot with her. Not wanting to hurt his feelings, he tells him that he can do a lot better. Art makes his way to his next class. It's an upper division class, so it would be quite unusual for a first year to get there. Hence, the murmurs quickly start as he makes his way there. He finds Claire and Curtis standing there as well, so he decides to join them. Not long after, Tessia and Clive also made their way there. While he's standing there waiting for the class to begin, he finally meets his enemy at the Exiris Academy. Arrogant, deceitful, and treacherous are the qualities that define the person that Lucas Wykes is. Not long after their by-chance encounter, the whole class hears a screeching noise. It seems that their teacher has finally arrived. She certainly knows how to make an entrance as she arrives riding on a giant eagle. Upon landing, she welcomes the students, followed by an introduction. Her name is Professor Glory, and she'll be their instructor for the Team Fighting Mechanics 1 course. Her bond is a flare hawk named Torch. Art uses his magic to see how strong the professor is, but his attempt fails and he finds it quite weird. Why would she feel the need to hide her level and her elemental attributes among a bunch of students? As usual, Art quickly catches the teacher's eye. She walks up to him to meet her newest colleague. It seems she intends to put the spotlight on Art. The rest of the class becomes curious and asks the professor if it's really true. She makes no effort to hide the fact that Art is not only a freshman DC officer, but will also be teaching the mana manipulation class as a professor. Anger and jealousy fill all the upperclassmen. They cannot believe that this scrawny freshman will be teaching a class, an opportunity that not even some of the best upperclassmen get. Professor Glory seems to have succeeded in her attempt to put a target on Art's back. Now she tries to calm everyone by telling them that they should believe in the director's decision. She states that Art has proven himself by defeating a professor. Yet this has the opposite effect as the students get even more riled up. They believe that anyone can beat an underclassman professor, especially one that was some thug adventurer. Seeing the students all fired up, she comes up with an idea. She offers them a chance to test the new professor of the practical mana manipulation class. Their intentions become clear as they stare at Art with bloodthirsty eyes. It's as if they're wolves stalking their prey. Art tries to politely decline the offer, but his answer is not acceptable to the professor. She states that he only needs to prove himself through a demonstration, which is only fair for all the students. It seems that it's too late to do anything about it, and Art's only option is to go through with it. The demonstration will be in the form of a game that she likes to play at the start of every semester. But her idea of a game seems to be a bit too extreme. So instead, Curtis makes a suggestion. He suggests a team mock battle with the 3 disciplinary committee officers on one team. This way they can test not only Art, but also the disciplinary committee. Clive makes a proposition of his own. He suggests he and Tessia be on the other team. Things have started to get more interesting as it has now become a battle between the disciplinary committee and the student council. Regardless, as of now, the student council only has 2 members, while the disciplinary committee has 3, so it would be unfair. This problem is solved as Lucas volunteers to be on the student council's team. He is the other genius freshman that is attending an upper division class. With everything set, the students get ready to start their battle. Everyone puts on their uniform and their fighting gear. Before starting their match, Professor Glory explains the rules to everyone. The match will have a time limit of 30 minutes, after which they will have a short discussion and analysis session. Since Curtis and Claire have had more classical training than the 2 first years on the student council team, the DC team is given a handicap. Art is made the king of the team. This means that if the opponent team can knock him out, then the entire team loses. The gear that they are using are artifacts designed to measure the amount of damage dealt. If the damage crosses a certain limit, the gear will make a shrill noise indicating that they are out. Anyone who decides to ignore this warning and continue fighting will be immediately banned from this class, and might even face expulsion. She makes it clear that their equipment is not designed to protect them. They should be able to protect themselves with mana. With all the explanations done, Professor gives the signal to commence the battle. Everyone quickly leaps into action. Claire goes after Clive, while Curtis and Grotter go against Tessia. Though Curtis probably won't be able to beat Tessia, he should be able to hold her off long enough. As Art scans the battlefield, he sees Lucas arrogantly walking toward him. Art was under the wrong impression that Lucas might have become more humble after coming to Exiris Academy. But that's not the case. As expected of Lucas, he started making sarcastic comments about how Art is scared of losing to him and destroying his reputation. Professor Glory is closely observing their battle from above while riding on Torch. As usual, shortly after Art releases his mana, everyone on the battlefield can sense his immense strength. He uses his wind magic to launch himself and dashes toward Lucas at great speed. In response, Lucas uses his domain spell called Inferno's Cage. As the name suggests, it covers an area with a wall of fire. Art manages to save himself from the flames by using his earth magic. Next, Lucas uses the same fireball spell he used during their rank examination. The spell is much stronger than it was back then. He creates hundreds of fireballs floating on top of them. and since they are still trapped in the Inferno's cage, Art cannot run away. With Lucas's command, the fireballs start falling toward Art. As soon as they hit the ground, they start exploding. Art barely manages to dodge them, but at this rate, it's only a matter of time before one of them hits him. Lucas couldn't be happier seeing Art struggle because of his spell. Sylvie gets concerned and contacts Art telepathically. Despite his current situation, he assures her that he's fine and asks her how the others are doing. As expected, Tessia is winning against Curtis, while Claire is against Clive. Slowly, the fireballs get more and more intense. There seems to be no end to them. This is because, with Lucas's growing strength, his mana pool has also increased greatly. Art tries to attack him directly, yet he finds his path blocked by more fireballs. Without his fire and water attributes, he seems to be struggling against the heat. On top of that, he knows that his mana pool is not as great as Lucas's, so if it comes down to a battle of stamina, he's sure to lose. Lucas starts making fun of Art, saying that he's glad he's not on the disciplinary committee because he could never be on the same team as someone as incompetent as him. Art ignores the insult to focus on defense. He continues to use his earth magic to defend himself against the fireballs. He is also unable to counterattack because of his inefficiency with the wind attribute. As expected, he slowly starts to take damage. He is even forced to pull out his sword, but he can still only hope to guard himself. He needs to come up with a plan quickly to counter Lucas, otherwise he will certainly lose. Simply put, wind magic is pushing and pulling. It's about manipulating the air to achieve the desired effect. But what if Art were to manipulate the air particles themselves? This way he could get rid of the very thing that keeps a fire burning, oxygen. Nevertheless, this would require intense concentration. And with Art being forced to protect himself from the constant attacks, will he be able to manipulate the particles fast enough to extinguish the fire? If he's unable to do so, then he would leave himself defenseless against Lucas's attack. Art finds this funny in a way. Normally, he wouldn't be thinking so much, so he tells himself to stop thinking and just do it. The professor becomes impressed with Lucas's performance. He's much better than she had heard. Inferno's Cage is one of the tougher flame attribute domain spells, and yet he's able to use it so proficiently, and at such a young age. On top of that, his mana reserves rival that of a silver core mage. On the other hand, Art is no less impressive. She notes that he lacks variation in his spells, but makes up for it with his fluid movement and tight control. The lack of variation is a result of his lack of experience with these two elements, but the professor is unaware of that. She was only mildly curious about the kid who was able to defeat a veteran adventurer, but the pressure she felt when Art released his mana was something she had never expected. She wonders what kind of life he has lived to be capable of that at such a young age. On the battlefield, Art decides to put his plan into action. He takes a deep breath because after he starts using the magic, he might not be able to breathe. Unable to defend himself while concentrating, Art starts taking damage from the fireballs. He ignores the pain and continues moving toward Lucas. Slowly but surely, his plan starts to work. Even Professor Glory is left amazed. She flies in closer to get a better look as she is unable to believe what she's witnessing. Unlike wind magic, trying to manipulate air itself requires much more insight and a higher level of concentration. This is why mages are unable to suck the air out of their opponent's lungs. It would take hours of concentration to manipulate the air inside a moving target. Hence, many just use their bodies as a source or a pre-designated unmovable location. Art keeps the area of effect as close to his body as possible. Even then, to be able to do what he's doing is nothing short of amazing. He creates a thin layer of vacuum around his body. Because of this, he's able to walk through the fire as if it were nothing. Regardless, it's not perfect, and he continues to take damage little by little. At this rate, will his uniform be able to hold out before he reaches Lucas? With his spells being continuously blocked, Lucas is getting nervous as Art approaches him. He decides to use an all-out spell to finish it in one blow. He uses the Flame Guardian spell to summon a fire elemental. This brings a smile to Art's face as he realizes that Lucas is at his limit. Just as Art is about to counter the Flame Guardian, he suddenly feels a surge of mana. This is followed by a message from Sylvie telling him that Tessia is in danger. With him being distracted, the Flame Guardian attacks him and nearly takes him out. Due to the constant attacks from the Flame Guardian, Art is unable to do anything. He finds himself backed up into a corner and is forced to use his trump card. He uses the Static Void to freeze time for everyone. Because of his fight with Lucas, Art doesn't have much mana left, so he has to work fast. He finally realizes what is happening. The surge of mana that he felt earlier was Curtis realizing his beast will. He seems to have launched a powerful spell toward Tessia. And for some reason, she isn't defending herself. If this spell had made contact, Tessia would surely have been in a lot of danger. Art starts to feel the pain from using Static Void. Despite the pain, he crawls to Tessia to protect her. But he soon comes to a chilling realization. He doesn't have enough mana to block the powerful attack. There is only one thing he can do now. As the Static Void runs out, he hugs Tessia to be a human shield for her. Both of them become completely enveloped in a beam of light. A few minutes ago, Tessia had been engaged in a battle with Curtis. Due to her training with Virion, she is much stronger than Curtis and had no problem blocking his attacks. Prince had to give his all just to keep up with her. As he went in for another attack, she easily dodges it and prepares to counterattack. Just when it seems like it's all over for him, Tessia suddenly feels a throbbing pain in her mana core. Due to being distracted by the pain, the power of her attack is reduced. Even though Curtis is hit by the attack and is sent flying, he comes out of it relatively unscathed. Tessia is confused about what is happening to her, but still chooses to power through it and continue fighting. Since Curtis' attacks have not been working, he decides to use his beast will. He starts gathering a large amount of mana to fire a powerful spell. Tessia realizes this and decides to use a protective spell. Her body becomes covered with vines. These vines also attack Curtis and Grotter to disrupt their concentration. They skillfully dodge the vines while getting closer and closer to her. With the pain getting increasingly intense, the princess begins to lose her strength. She realizes that this is probably because of the Elderwood Guardian's beast will that she got from Art. She always has the option to forfeit, but her pride would not allow that. After all, she is the student council president, so she cannot have anyone thinking that she's weak, much less a coward. After having gathered enough mana, Curtis launches a powerful spell called the World's Howl. The pain from her mana core becomes so intense that Tessia starts to faint, leaving her completely defenseless to the incoming attack. Just as she's about to lose consciousness, she sees Art suddenly appear in front of her. A huge blast occurs as the attack makes contact. Professor finally arrives, but she is too late. Both Art and Tessia lie unconscious on the ground. The professor is surprised to see Art there since no one saw him moving in. Curtis becomes worried and starts apologizing to Professor Glory, telling her that he did not mean for this to happen. But right now the most important thing is to get unconscious students to the medical ward. She quickly orders the standby team to start the damage assessment. Some time has passed and Art wakes up in a hospital. He's covered in bandages, with Sylvie standing on top of him. She's angry with him for always putting himself in near-death situations. Art pats her head and apologizes for always making her worry. He gets visited by Cynthia. She has come to see how he is doing. He asks her about Tessia's condition. Because he protected her, her injuries are not as bad as his. Yet there is another problem. As Art has already realized the problem, it is the beast's will that he gave her. As always, he starts blaming himself for their condition, but Cynthia tells him that it's her fault for keeping her beast will a secret. If she had at least told the professor, this situation could have been avoided. She thanked him for saving her disciple. Before leaving, Cynthia tells him that she has contacted both his and Tessia's family, so they should be here soon. As she leaves the room, she finds Tessia standing outside the door. She wants to go in and meet Art, but she can't seem to find the courage to do so. Cynthia tries to cheer her up by joking about eating desserts that were brought in for them. Nonetheless, Tessia can't stop thinking about Art. After some time, Art's family finally arrives. As always, Alice is very worried about him. Art apologizes to everyone for always worrying them. Ellie, on the other hand, tries to hide her worry behind a snarky comment. This is confirmed when Ray reveals that she had been crying even more than his mom. Alice asks him how he got hurt so badly on his first day of school. When Ray suggests that he must have gotten into a fight, Art decides to play along and jokingly suggests that the other guy got the worst of it. They all see the humor in it other than Alice. Knowing his strength, she feels that he might have obliterated some poor child. The conversation is interrupted as the royal family arrives to visit Art. Both Ray and Alice are left shocked. They quickly bow down to greet the King of Eleanor. The king tells them that it's not necessary. They have been eager to meet the parents of the child who saved their daughter not once, but twice. Ray also greets Virion, and they finally get to meet Tessia. She introduces herself as a friend of Art. Yet, judging from the cheeky smiles on their faces, they seem to have misunderstood. They had heard so much about Tessia from Art, but this is their first time meeting her. Alice jokingly suggests that they're going to be together in the future, leaving Tessia completely embarrassed. Even Varian decides to play along. Now that all the greetings are done, Art decides to address the issue that got him into this situation. He asks Varian if he has had the chance to look at Tessia's manicore. The good news is that her body is more compatible with her beast will than Art's body was with his own. But the question on Varian's mind is how Art managed to obtain an Elderwood Guardian's beast core in the first place. Art nonchalantly tells him that he got it by killing one, but it only raises more questions than it answers. Cynthia comes to Art's rescue by telling them that their visiting time is over. Tessia needs to be monitored, and besides, there seems to be many more visitors waiting for their chance to meet Art. After his family left, he continued to get visitors throughout the day. Some came seeking answers for what happened, while others came out of concern. This included Gideon as well, who came to bring Art a new medicine he had created. Before leaving, Gideon tells him that he should stop by his training room after he has recovered. Cynthia asked him to build some training artifacts, and now that they're complete, he wants Art to try them out. He is surprised that he will be getting this for free. Regardless, it doesn't take long for Gideon to show his true intentions. Now that everyone has left, Art can finally relax. That's what he thought. Not 2 minutes go by and Art gets another visitor. This time, it's Tessia. It seems she has finally gathered the courage to meet him. Art starts asking her all sorts of questions about her manicore and the pain she experienced. Tessia finds this funny, that Art can still worry about her when he almost died himself. It was the same when they were kids, when he rescued her from the bandits. Art tries to move, but he still hasn't fully recovered. She becomes concerned about him. Art assures her that he is going to be fine so she can stop worrying about him. She once again apologizes to Art. He assumes that she's apologizing because he had to save her again. But that's not the case. She is making an apology for taking advantage of him. Just as she says this, she moves in and kisses him. She quickly runs out of the room from sheer embarrassment. She did it in the heat of the moment, but now she cannot be more uneasy thinking about it. All sorts of questions fill her mind, like maybe she came on too strong and what he's going to think about her now. She even thinks about going back to the room and playing it off as a joke. But she can't be thinking like that. If she had left everything up to Art, then things would have never progressed. He still treats her like a child every time they are together, and she wanted to change that. Hence, her reason for doing what she did. She tells herself that it would be his loss if he doesn't like her back. This is an obvious attempt to cheer herself up. Nevertheless, it doesn't seem to have worked. Art, on the other hand, is left completely shocked by what just happened. One can say his concerns are a little different from Tessia's. He cannot believe that he kissed a 13-year-old girl. Does that make him a criminal now? He tries to calm himself down by telling himself that he's in the body of a 12-year-old boy, so it must be fine. As a matter of fact, in this world, children around their age get married, and besides, she was the one who kissed him. Despite all this, his teenage body seems to have been having a different reaction. 2 days go by. While Art is recovering, the mana manipulation class has been suspended. Rumors have already begun flying around about the first year who's going to be the new professor of this class. Art has recovered enough to be moving around on his own, though he still needs a cane. Accompanied by Cynthia and Gideon, Art makes his way to his new training room. Tomorrow is also going to be his first day as the professor. The director asks him if he had time to prepare some material. Considering that Art got discharged from the hospital just the day before, the answer is an obvious no. He asks Cynthia about Tessia's assimilation. Because of everything that happened between them, things have gotten a little awkward, so Art cannot ask her himself. Cynthia tells him that it's been going smoothly. But soon Varian will have to go back to Eleanor. With that being the case, Art wonders who is going to take over his job now. But before he can finish the question, they are interrupted by Gideon as they have finally arrived at the training room. Gideon seems to be most excited, even though he was complaining before about how it was a waste of his time. Cynthia had only asked him to build some sturdy artifacts so Art can train, but he seems to have done a lot more than that. As soon as they enter, Art can feel the abundant mana flowing within the room. This comes as an annoyance to Gideon, who wants Art to appreciate his hard work instead of admiring the room. Gideon has built a sparing robot for Art to fight against. From the way he talks about it, one can tell how proud he is of his work. Gideon claims that this robot is the greatest addition of his training operator and blast inductor, or Toby for short. Toby is currently set to level 5, which roughly translates to a dark orange core mana beast or a yellow core human. But unlike a human, Toby has a solid palagonite iron body. This means that although his attacks will be on the same level as a yellow core human, his durability will be even higher. Before Gideon continues boasting about his creation, his happiness is cut short. Art steps forward and punches Toby using his magic. Despite Gideon's talk about how great Toby is, one punch from Art is all it takes for it to be destroyed. It seems Gideon didn't know how strong Art was. Elsewhere outside the Exiris city, a party of adventurers is clearing out a cave. This is a party sent by the king of Sapin. This party also includes Lucas's brother, Baron. They are investigating the monsters who have appeared in this cave. It's strange as they don't usually get this big. On top of that, the entrance to this cave is sealed so no one could have entered. However, Baron realizes the seriousness of this issue when he finds a piece of cloth with the symbol of one of the nations. Back at the Exiris Academy, Art has begun his training. He's engaged in a battle with the 7th edition of Toby. They go back and forth, exchanging blows. Nonetheless, as expected, Toby is still no match for Art. Despite Art's injuries, he is still making a mockery out of Gideon's greatest creation. Despite his annoyance, he still asks for Art's feedback so he can make more improvements. Firstly, Toby's joints seem to be a very big weak spot, so it needs more reinforcement. Secondly, it cannot use any elemental spells, so that's a very big offensive weakness. However, this was a design choice that Gideon made on purpose. He had assumed that Toby was going to be fighting an augmenter, not the devil incarnate. Art decides to add one more thing to the list. Although it's a bit of a nuance, he wants Toby to have better mana reinforcement. This leaves both Cynthia and Gideon confused. Toby creates a layer of protective mana around his body like any normal human mage. Although it's the easiest and the fastest way a mage can protect himself, it also has a huge weakness. If the attacks are targeted at the same spot, this shield can be broken through very easily. Hence, Art makes a different suggestion. Although it's a bit more complicated and extensive, it would be better if Toby could conjure an array of individual mana plates that are interconnected with each other. This way, if the barrier is broken through, it can be repaired very easily. So instead of wasting mana conjuring up a completely new barrier, one can focus on repairing only the damaged part. Art doesn't realize how revolutionary his idea is. Everyone present is left completely stunned. Cynthia quickly rushes off to relay this to the Mages Guild to see what they have to say. Today is also Art's first day as a professor. After all his training with Toby, he can barely walk. If he were to enter the class like this, it would surely not leave a good impression. Luckily for him, he comes across Princess Catherine. Before he can apologize for nearly bumping into her, she takes his arm and puts it around her shoulder. She wants to help him walk to his class. Back in the class, everyone is talking about their new professor. They are all looking forward to making a fool out of the first year. Others even seem disappointed that the school is hiring first years as teachers. They are all left stunned as Art enters the class with his arm wrapped around Princess Catherine. Even Ferrith is impressed. After Princess Catherine takes her seat, Art finally starts the lecture. He starts by introducing himself, Arthur Lewin, a member of the disciplinary committee, the son of 2 wonderful mages, a doting brother, and the new professor of the mana manipulation class. As expected, this is met by loud and angry boos from everyone. One student even jumps down onto the field and challenges Art to a fight. He claims that if Art can become a teacher by beating the old professor, then he can do the same. This action has the full backing of all the students. All his energy quickly dissipates as soon as Art releases his mana. The student cannot help but feel terrified. Art once again addresses the class. He tells them that whether they like it or not, the fact is that he is their new professor. He even tells them that they are free to leave if they want. In fact, he will allow them to take another class instead of this one. Regardless if they are curious about how a little boy with a limp can become a professor of the most prestigious magical academy, then he encourages them to stay. About the student who jumped onto the field, Art gives him 2 options. Either he can lead the class or go back to his seat. He seems to have found his manners after witnessing Art's strength. Without arguing, he quickly makes his way back to his seat. Art begins the lecture with a practical question. What is the best way to utilize mana from the surrounding atmosphere? No one seems to know the answer other than one student. She replies that the best way to utilize mana from the surrounding is to absorb it in one's mana core and use it to conjure spells. The main difference between augmenters and conjurers lies in the fact that augmenters mostly use their mana channels. Conjurers, on the other hand, use mana directly from their surroundings via their mana veins. Considering this fact, Art raises another question for the students. Why do both types of mages have to meditate and absorb mana, if only the augmenters primarily utilize it and absorb it into their core? Once again, no one knows the answer except for the sane girl. Although conjurers don't form physical attacks, they still need to use their mana to manipulate the one in the surroundings to form a spell. Judging from her behavior, it's obvious that this girl is a know-it-all. Art follows up her answer with another question. Since conjurers use less mana in their attacks than augmenters do, then is the color of one's mana core a truly accurate way of measuring one's strength? This question leaves everyone wondering. While they keep this question in mind, Art requests 6 volunteers for a demonstration. He requires 3 augmenters and 3 conjurers. The 2 conjurers also include Ferrith and Cathion. With everyone lined up, Art begins the demonstration. He instructs everyone to use the most basic spell of their affinity. Following the instructions, everyone quickly forms the spell on their hands. What comes next shocks the 6 volunteers. Art instructs the augmenters to launch the spell and conjurers to absorb the spell back into their hands. Everyone finds this absurd, as normally it's the opposite of what conjurers and augmenters are good at. Nevertheless, each volunteer tries to do as they are instructed, but they fail miserably. The only one who finds a bit of success is Cathion. As expected, it doesn't take long for the students to get annoyed. They began to call this whole exercise stupid and question why it was even necessary. Instead of answering their question with words, Art decides to give them a practical demonstration. He fires a wind spell at the wall, but nothing special happens. No one is impressed as they don't see the point. Art fires off another spell, but this time it's much stronger. This time, everyone is left stunned to see an augmenter launch such a powerful spell. Although he cannot accurately demonstrate what happens when a conjurer absorbs their spell, he can only ask them to trust him. With this demonstration out of the way, Art encourages the whole class to come down onto the field and try this out. As the class ends, everyone is left wondering about Art's strength. They seem more invested than they were before the class. So all in all, one can call Art's first lecture as a professor a success. After the class, he is visited by Princess Cathion. From her body language, one can tell that she has something on her mind. After a while of small talk, she finally builds up the courage to speak up. Art begins to worry if Cathion is also going to profess her love for him. Luckily for him, that's not the case. She wants to apologize on behalf of her family. This is about what happened with Sebastian at the auction house all those years ago. She wants to apologize for her father's behavior as well as her brother's blunder in the alleyway. Art is surprised that she's still bothered by things that happened over 4 years ago. She tells him that although she looks up to her father, he disappointed her on that day. Art assures her that what happened was in the past, and she doesn't need to apologize for them. Nonetheless, she felt it was necessary, seeing how they had become friends. But her definition of a friend seems to be a little misplaced. She had grown up blaming her lineage, her magical prowess, as well as their physical appearance for robbing her freedom. So when she looks at Art, she wonders how a boy so talented, sought after, investigated, and judged, be so bright. Art's behavior gets a chuckle out of her. This is indeed a big moment, as this is the first time the literal Ice Princess has laughed. Embarrassed by this, Cathion quickly changes the topic. She asks Art why the outcome of the 2 wind bullets turned out to be so different. Art's answer is enough to cheer her up. He tells her that it would be unfair if he gave his brightest student an even bigger advantage. After his classes are over, he heads to the training room to help Tessia with her assimilation. As always, Sylvie is very excited to meet her. Things seem to be finally getting back to normal between the 2 of them. Assimilation with any beast takes a lot of effort, and most of the time it cannot be done alone. Oftentimes a mage with the same elemental affinity as the beast is needed to take some of the burden off the host. Being a quadra-elemental mage, Art is able to use an even balance of all forms of all 4 elements. This not only helps Tessia with her beast will, but also strengthens her body and helps her fight against the Elderwood Guardian trying to establish control over her mana core. At the end of their session, both of them are left exhausted. Tessia finally addresses what happened between the 2 of them. She asks Art if he's mad at her for kissing him. He tells her that he was just surprised, but he is not mad. She follows it up with another question and asks him why he's been avoiding her then. But this is something Art cannot answer truthfully. So instead, he plays it off as a joke, telling her that they cannot get married since she's royalty, and he's a commoner. Nevertheless, this only upsets Tessia. She knows it was wrong of her to take advantage of him, but she just wanted things to progress between them. Art once again decides to joke about it since that's all he can do. This time she gets mad. Although she didn't expect an answer from him yet, she at least wanted him to take her feelings seriously. She tells him that there are so many things he's good at, like magic, fighting, and wits. But there are also things he's not good at. She reveals that the people around him do notice when he puts on a mask and pretends that he's happy and unaffected by everything that happens. She even reveals that she knows that he rejected Lilia, which comes as a surprise to Art. With that, she storms out of the room, leaving him to wonder how